When we're young, we believe that studying in another city, away from our parents, gives us complete freedom, as well as the opportunity to manage our own time and choose our own social circle. And living in a dorm looks especially fascinating at first glance, since it always seems fun. However, it isn't always as good as we imagine. And it was this kind of disappointment that a resident of a small Chinese town faced. When the young woman started university, she knew that a new life was beginning for her, and she couldn't even imagine exactly what she would have to face. After starting her studies, she was provided with a small room in a dorm. The young woman was happy to learn that 2 senior students would also be living with her. But she soon realized that she couldn't continue living that way. The thing was that every night, a noisy company of guys gathered in their room. Since they were older, the young woman couldn't say anything to them. Thus, they would all have their fun in their room, every night, while she simply couldn't fall asleep until morning, spending her nights staring at the ceiling. Perhaps this kind of life would suit someone else, but she came to the city to study, since this was her only chance at escaping her small town, and she couldn't let her parents down. And so, when it became too difficult to study, she asked to be moved to another room. But as it turned out, all the rooms were taken. She was desperate and asked for any kind of transfer, because she could no longer study and live in such conditions. Thus, a few days later, the dorm supervisor came up with an idea, but she told her it wasn't the best option, so the young woman could get a single room. But the catch was that this room had been empty for several years because it needed some serious renovations. But if she agreed to it, she would have the keys immediately. After seeing the room she was offered, the room where she would have to live for the next 5 years, the student got very upset. However, there was no other options, and the prospect of living alone was rather appealing. Looking at the dilapidated room, the woman agreed to move there, realizing that it would take her a lot of work to make a beautiful room out of the space she was given. When the student moved into the room, it was all covered in dirt and trash, while the walls were all covered with strange drawings and inscriptions. It looked as if some kind of drug addicts had lived there and left their art all over the place. Moreover, the ceiling and walls of the room had damp stains all over them, indicating that it had been flooded more than once. Thus, the walls had already gotten covered with mold. But that wasn't even all of it. The furniture looked as if it had survived a couple of wars, and the sockets seemed to have a life of their own. Nevertheless, the young student had nowhere else to go, and therefore she pulled herself together and started working on the room. She took a piece of paper and made a list of everything she wanted to change in the room, and set out to work. First of all, she went to the hardware store for tools and materials. When she had everything she needed, the first thing she did was get rid of the moldy wallpaper. She had to manually scrape it off the walls and ceiling. After that, the primer and putty went into action. It took the young student a few days of after-school work to make the room look livable. And when the first round of work was finished, she used some inexpensive white paint for the finishing touches. After all the renovations, the room even started to look bigger. The next step was to deal with the furniture. In order to prevent it from completely falling apart, the young woman bought some cheap tape and used it to cover all the cabinets, the doors, and the bedside table. It didn't work out perfectly, but nevertheless, the room got a completely new look. Being smart, as well as using social networks for ideas, the student even detached the old sockets on her own and replaced them with new ones. Instead of a light bulb proudly hanging on a wire, the woman bought a ceiling lamp, and in order not to see the window with the lattice, albeit a freshly painted one, the woman covered it with a light curtain. Moreover, she installed a decorative grid on the walls and placed various photographs there. Meanwhile, the bed got new throw pillows and a change in linens. The finishing touch was the purchase of a small light rug and the design of a dressing table. Plus, she got a new small office table and a simple but nice chair. All this work took the young student almost 2 weeks to complete, but she didn't regret anything. After all, she'd be living in this place for 5 years. Even the dorm supervisor couldn't believe how much the room had transformed. All she had to say was that the young woman had golden hands and was very creative. The student shared these photographs on a social network, and surprisingly, it turned out that she had never done anything like this on her own before. It was the first time she'd ever held construction tools in her hands, and she certainly never made repairs before. But as you can see, she did a great job. It's a good way to start one's independent life, by creating something with your own hands. And if that person is willing to work to improve their surroundings, they will always be able to solve any problem and turn their situation in their favor. And how great would it feel to have something to be proud of, even if it's a seemingly small achievement? Friends, what do you think about the woman's decision to move and the work she did on her new room? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And that's probably all for today. Rate the video if you liked it, and see you soon. Bye.